Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking Avengers, Age of Ultron. So after seemingly forever, we finally get our sequel to Avengers, and all in all, it's a good movie. I really did enjoy it quite a lot. I guess the only reason I'm not a little bit more excited about it is, well, there are basically, I think there are two reasons why I'm not more pumped for this movie than I am. And again, don't take it as me thinking that this movie is bad. I thought it was quite good on a lot of levels. But the first one is simply the first Avengers movie was the culmination of a bunch of movies over a couple of years. It was like a dream come true. So seeing all of those Marvel movies come together for real, I mean, there really just were no words for it for a comic book geek. Here, it's been enough time for us to really settle in that the Avengers are a thing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We know there are going to be more Avengers movies. There's going to be Infinity War and all this other stuff. So it's just not that magical moment of the impossible thing that you never thought you would see. Especially me, as somebody who grew up back in the 90s. So there's that. And there's also just, and this is something that Joss Whedon kind of has admitted in some of his interviews and talking about the movie, where he said that he's not really that great at plot. It's the character moments that are his real strong suit. And I agree with him. I mean, Joss Whedon does really great stuff with his characters, but he doesn't stretch out the most interesting overarching plots in the world. I mean, what he does is usually perfectly serviceable, and he'll throw a few twists at you, sure, but yeah, but it ain't Game of Thrones, you know. And well, that's just one of Joss Whedon's flaws as a filmmaker, and all filmmakers have them. So you have to sort of accept those things with as part of the product. It's a feature, not a bug, and just sort of go with that. But yeah, I mean, this movie really did not have the strongest plot. There were things that were real. Obviously, from what we've seen before, we know that there were stuff was cut from the movie. There was supposed to be a female character from Wakanda who was shown in some of the preview materials, and that got cut. Apparently, from what I've been hearing, quite a lot of stuff ended up on the cutting room floor with this movie. Who knows? We'll find out more when the DVD comes out. But there's a lot going on, and yeah, just plot not the strongest thing in the world. So let's just kind of get into what's going on with the characters, and then we'll talk about the plot a little bit more. So let's start off with the original team, and we'll talk more about the new characters. So Hulk, this episode, Bruce Banner. I was thinking about this movie after having seen it last night, and I kind of realized something. So in the Hulk's backstory in this movie is roughly what happened in the last live-action Hulk movie. Banner even said in the last movie, "I kind of broke Harlem." And then in this movie, he goes on a big rampage in Johannesburg in South Africa. So in both times, and this is weird that he kind of says, like, now the public has finally seen what the Hulk can really do. Didn't they see that when you destroyed Harlem, Bruce? But in any case, both of the times the Hulk has gone on a major super destructive rampage in a non-heroic fashion, although I suppose, the last one was a little bit more about trying to put a stop to the abomination, but, whatever. He's done so in places that are, well, basically where mostly black people live. Harlem, I mean, it's a little bit different today, but it's still considered mostly kind of a black part of New York. And Johannesburg in South Africa, well, obviously white people live there. I mean, South Africa is a diverse country, and we do see them in the movie, but I mean, were you paying attention? Most of the people there in Johannesburg were black. So it sort of looks like the Hulk is basically an enormous racist. He really seems to enjoy destroying places where lots of black people live. And I know I'm probably a little bit of a horrible person for saying that, but do keep in mind, jokes are jokes. people say all the time things all the time in jokes that are really not indicative of their true feelings. That's kind of what jokes usually are. Now, not that saying that people don't make, you know, racist jokes or, you know, anti-Semitic jokes or whatever, and that's genuinely how they feel. But, you know, the idea that you're going to slap a label like that on somebody just because they made a remark that you don't care for. I mean, seriously, there has to be a little bit of people aren't perfect in there. But in any case, so yeah, you have to imagine that like the Marvel Cinematic Universe's version of Tumblr is all full of like angry college kids just talking about how the Hulk is a racist is racist. I mean, come on, you've all freaking seen Tumblr. Tell me that isn't happening. Tell me that isn't happening. And then there's this whole thing with him and Black Widow, and you know, this is another one of those situations where it's very Joss Whedon. You know, she likes, you know, Natasha's all about a person who's really all about fighting and stuff like that. You know, she's been trained to be a secret agent and assassin since she could walk, basically. And it's the guy who runs away from the fight because he knows he'll always win, is how she puts it. And that's what really draws her to Banner. And again, if this wasn't characters like Bruce Banner and Natasha Romanoff, who I feel I know fairly well from the comics, I could buy into this. But, you know, my knowledge of the kind of guys that Black Widow goes for in the comics, guys like her husband she was actually married in the comics to a guy who was an astronaut in Russia. You know, she had a thing with Hercules. He's also been involved with Hawkeye, and I think there was some stuff going on with Tony Stark. So, you know, she does sort of go for the more charismatic guys. That's kind of her thing. So you can say a lot about Bruce Banner, but charismatic is not one of them. Now, granted, this is a different interpretation of the character, but it just doesn't feel right for me. But that still doesn't mean that there weren't some nice moments. You know, Banner had we got to see some really great action with the Hulk. I mean, his fight with Iron Man was awesome. Just, you know, the general fight against Ultron was cool as hell. I mean, again, on the action front, everything with the Hulk was great. There were lots of really fun moments with you know, Bruce Banner. It's like, is this a code green? And you know, he and Black Widow play off each other really well. You know, she's like, "I adore you, but I need the other guy." And then they had that whole scene about how, like, I can't have kids, and then Black Widow explains that, you know, like, you know, the Black Widow program sterilizes them so that neither can she. And again, it's all nicely done. Although, what the hell was this thing with her talking to Nick Fury? It's like, did you know this was going to happen when you sent me to talk to Banner? Like, wait, so in addition to all this spy bullshit Nick Fury does, he sits around and plays Cupid? I mean, what does this guy have, a frickin' crystal ball that you would be attracted to this guy? I mean, that's bullshit. I mean, that's really just plain bullshit. And then this whole thing ends up with Banner taking off for parts unknown, basically, just so they can make it interesting when they bring him back next time around, and also to sort of help set up the sort of new Avengers that we have at the end of this movie. Black Widow. Well, again, kind of most of what's going on with her is her relationship with Banner in this movie. Although we do sort of get a lot of insight into her relationship with Hawkeye, and I'm sure a lot of people were like just upset as hell that no, there's really nothing romantic going on between these two whatsoever. They're really just very good friends. Suck it, shippers. Yeah, I don't really have I have a bit of a distaste for shipping in general, so forgive me for that one. But that really was a joke indicative of my true feelings. So yeah, it was a little interesting that she chose not to try and pick up the Hammer of Thor, because there was an alternate universe story out there where she did try and pick up the hammer and did prove worthy. But we'll talk a little bit more about that when we're talking about the Thor's hammer. But yeah, I mean, Black Widow, they really did a nice job of fleshing her out. They kind of gave her this romantic plot line with Banner. They really did a nice job of playing up her friendship with Hawkeye, having her bounce off the other Avengers really well. I mean, I really don't have a huge amount to say. They just really did a lot. They basically kind of picked up the torch of making Black Widow a more human character from Winter Soldier, ran with it, and did a nice job. I mean, I really don't have too much more to say than that. Let's see here. So, yeah, let's just hop on and briefly talk about Thor, since there's really not a huge amount to say about Thor this movie. Again, just sort of we get to see Thor not quite blending in on Earth yet again. We have all that weird stuff with him, like seeing these visions of the Asgardian version of Hell, and Idris Elba gets to reprise the role of Heimdall and all. But well, again, this is just all set up for Thor Ragnarok. It just doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense in the greater context of the movie. And yeah, I mean that's really all I got to say about Thor. But Thor's hammer. So yeah, in the comics, it is established that Captain America is indeed worthy of the power of Thor. He's picked up Thor's hammer before. And here he's able to just nudge it a little bit, which still freaks Thor out a little bit. And I kind of have the feeling this is probably going to lead to some big thing in Infinity War with Captain America successfully picking up Thor's hammer and then just charging into the battle with Captain America's his shield and Thor's hammer, not unlike how in the big DC versus Avengers versus Justice League crossover, Superman actually sort of waded into the final battle with Captain America's shield and Thor's hammer, because of course Superman is totally worthy of the power of Thor. And some people complain, well, Superman's so powerful, he doesn't need Captain America's shield and Thor's hammer. It's like, okay, yeah, well, Superman is of course super powerful, but that doesn't mean if you don't give him, powerful tools like the hammer and the shield, that he isn't going to be even more powerful. And yeah, he's invulnerable to most stuff, but as we've seen, a shield is, a very versatile tool to have at your disposal. You can't chuck it around quite like Captain America has, but being able to do that to people, that helps. But we're getting off track here. So the Vision is apparently worthy of the hammer, and a lot of people are seriously debating as to just, well, how the hell can that be possible? And people love to point out, like in Thor: The Dark World, Thor was able to toss Mjolnir on just like a regular coat rack or something like that in Jane Foster's apartment. It stayed there. And even this episode, in this movie, Captain America is like, well, if he puts it on an elevator and the elevator goes up, does that mean that the elevator is worthy? And this is like something they might touch on in the future films. But the Vision, even according to Thor, was worthy to take care of the Mind Gem. And again, the Vision had also just been born, so it's not as if there was any darkness within his soul. So again, the Vision was basically a newborn being that seemed to be filled with nothing but goodness and compassion. So, why not have him be worthy of the power? I mean, Scarlet Witch did kind of confirm basically that he does have a mind or a soul or whatever. I mean, how. And I mean, again, I don't really have a proper explanation as to how this is possible. This is part of why it was like, what the hell? But given just the bizarre circumstances under which that happened, it doesn't seem like ridiculously out there to me that this could be possible. So, it's one of those things. It's like, okay, maybe this will be important later, but this isn't really something we need to obsess over. I don't love how, like, Vision just sort of looks at Thor just after he's been born. Is like, cape. And now, of course, the fellow playing Vision, me being me, I can't remember his name, had done the voice of Jarvis in the Iron Man movies, played Jarvis on Agent Carter. So having him actually come on board as the Vision was really cool, and I like how they had a perfectly good reason for why he's called the Vision, and Vision gets to go out there, kick a lot of ass. He has that kind of interesting moment where he's sort of connects with Scarlet Witch a little bit. And then we get to see that thing at the end with him sort of just discussing the nature of humanity with Ultron. And he raises a very nice point that just because something won't last forever doesn't mean that it isn't beautiful. This is very in keeping with a lot of actually samurai philosophy of all things, and just sort of Japanese philosophy in general. I mean, the reason why the cherry blossom is so venerated in Japanese culture is that it is a sign of how beautiful life can be, but also a reminder of how short life can be. Cherry blossoms, when they bloom from the trees, these things only last really like about a week or 10 days if the weather's exceptionally nice. So when they're in bloom, things look absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I've been in Japan and gone to cherry blossom festivals, and they're amazingly wonderful. But again, it's only a very brief thing, just like life. Something we all should keep in mind. Nobody's getting any younger. So let's see here. Let's talk about Captain America. So yay for the Haley Atwell as Peggy Carter brief appearance in this movie. That was very nice. But again, Captain America, we see he's still feeling very disconnected from the world. He doesn't really feel like he has a place outside of the Avengers that he fits in. He even sort of makes the joke, I couldn't even afford to live in Brooklyn anymore, which is, of course, the part of New York where he grew up. And we also, of course, get to see him butting heads with Tony Stark. Again, part of their character is true. Also, clearly some setup for Captain America: Civil War. And it's just fun as hell to sort of see Iron Man and Captain America even duke it out a little bit in this movie, which is fun. But it's really not. It seems to me that that Captain America doesn't really seem to shine as a character beyond. He's really good at fighting and being a leader and all this other stuff, while occasionally throwing out the funny line because, this is a Joss Whedon movie. Until that moment towards the end where he's sort of talking with Black Widow and says, I don't think the man that came out of the ice is the same one that went in. He's saying, I don't really think I'm sort of meant to go out there and try and find a wife and have kids and sit around on a farm and just sort of have a normal life like Hawkeye. He sees that, he's meant to be a soldier. He's meant to be a leader. He's meant to be an Avenger. And that the Avengers are his family. They're the people who understand him, who get him. And, that possibility with Peggy is something that faded away a long time ago. But, who knows what's going to happen in the future. And I do like the idea that, maybe there might be some romantic thing going on with Cap in the future. Because, those sort of contrasts are always fun things. The guy who can, go out there and beat an army of crazy robots, but is still very awkward in trying to talk to the ladies. It's one of the great time-worn tropes of comics, but it never gets old. And just how cool was it to see him get pissed off and tear a piece of wood to shreds with his bare hands? That was fun. Oh, and speaking of cool, I genuinely did like it when Black Widow got to wield Captain America's shield, even if it was just for a little while. Those two do have a really nice bond, and I like seeing them together. They're fun. So let's see. Nothing huge to say. Well, nothing really huge to say about Hawkeye, other than the fact that he actually got to have some personality in this movie. Last time around he spent most of the movie being mind controlled by Loki, and then the rest of the time he was just sort of pissed off, but keeping it under wraps because he had to save the world. Here we get to see him talking with Black Widow, hanging out with his wife and kids. And this is based on the Ultimate Universe's version of Hawkeye, which introduced his wife and kids and then promptly murdered them. And that was one of the situations where even I was willing to go, man, that's totally some women in refrigerators right there. But just sort of seeing that Hawkeye actually can have this normal life and do this Avengers stuff, I mean, that was pretty cool. It really did flesh him out as a person. And then at the end of the day, it seems like he says to himself, like, you know what? I really do need to focus more on my family. I'm still going to go out there and be a good guy, but fighting crazy robots like this, I mean, this is too much. Of course, the great thing about Hawkeye is, yeah, he's just a guy who shoots arrows, but he's still able to go out there and stand toe to toe with the baddest of the bad. I mean, that's what makes him a great character. That and the fact that he's often a snarky asshole who loves being a dick to his fellow Avengers. But yeah, I did definitely like that sort of speech that he gives to Scarlet Witch. It really is what gets her off her ass and sort of really makes her make that proper transition so that she can become an Avenger. It's a nice crowning moment for Hawkeye. And in a way, I guess there's to say that makes Wanda his official replacement. It's kind of an unofficial endorsement in an odd sort of way. Let's see. What else? What else? What else? Okay, that covers, I think, our Avengers team. Again, nothing particular to say about Nick Fury this episode. It's just Samuel L. Jackson being Samuel L. Jackson. Again, he goes out there and does make it known to the Avengers and to S.H.I.E.L.D. that he's still alive, which will probably have some fallout on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Genuinely disappointed that we didn't get to see any of the actual agents from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the movie. I was kind of hoping they might work in Melinda May or Fitz or something like that. I mean, we did get Maria Hill, which was cool. I mean, they definitely did a nice job of making Maria Hill a much more faceted character and a lot more likable than her counterpart in the comics. But yeah, and did you notice that on the Shield helicarrier when all hell was breaking loose, the one technician guy, that was the one that's the same technician guy, he's played by the same actor who refused to take that order from Brock whatever Crossbones in Captain America Winter Soldier. So not only did that guy survive all that, he was brought in to help basically work alongside Nick Fury. I love that. I mean, the guy doesn't even have a name, but he was there. I'm sort of a little disappointed we didn't get to see the Galaga playing technician, but whatever. So let's see. We also have the character of Heather Cho, who in the comics is really portrayed as nothing more than the mother of Amadeus Cho, who's this teen genius who's basically the seventh smartest person in the world, and Amadeus Cho has some very strong connections to the Hulk and to Hercules. Here they just sort of basically took this character and did a decent job of fleshing her out, making her an important part of the creation of the Vision. And I loved her little line of "Will Thor be there?" Although that said, I can't help but think that this was more than a little bit of pandering to the South Korean market. Captain America Winter Soldier, we all know they had different lists of things for various countries around the world that Steve was going to take an interest in, including a Korean version where apparently he cares about who Park Ji-sung is. Yeah, because people in America totally care about Korean soccer players. And of course, a big part of the movie takes place in Seoul. Oddly enough, I actually happened to go with a group of people from the local university, which included a Korean guy. And later, after the movie, because I spent 3 years living in South Korea, 2 of them about an hour outside of Seoul. So as I'm watching the movie, I'm trying to I think I recognize 1 or 2 places in there, and the Korean guy was like, "Yeah, I recognize a few places in there." And do keep in mind, and I don't know if you guys might have heard about this, but I was actually living in South Korea when they were filming that part of the movie, and it was really big news there that the Avengers film crew actually stumbled across the dead body of a guy who had committed suicide by jumping into the Han River while they were filming Age of Ultron. So yeah, and there was even a guy who on a Western a foreign English teacher who had gone down there and managed to get a grainy cell phone photo from a distance of Chris Evans, or possibly his son man, in the Captain America costume. But yeah, it was definitely, and just I can tell you from my time there that in South Korea, Avengers did gangbuster business. I worked with a lot of elementary school kids, and after that movie went out, man, they thought Iron Man was the shit. Iron Man, Hulk, and Thor were the really big ones that they liked. but the biggest one by far was Iron Man. Korean, like little Korean boys, absolutely freaking love Iron Man. But yeah, in fact, I even have a Korean Avengers poster stored away in my stash of goodies that I brought back from overseas. But let's see. Yeah, so I kind of had the feeling they were pandering a little bit to the Korean market there. Just like sort of like what was it? Iron Man 3 did more than a little bit of pandering to the Chinese market. But this is just the reality of modern movie making, and I'm sure we all noticed more than a few very blatant product placements like Korean Air, Gillette, Adidas, and it's just like, come on, really? I mean, it wasn't as bad as say that very prominent, Marlboro cigarette truck in Superman 2, but come on. But anyway, nothing really huge to getting back to the characters. Nothing really huge to say about Quicksilver as a character. I mean, I really did like that story he told about we waited 2 days for Tony Stark to kill us. Of course, you have to wonder, well, why are you taking this out on the people who actually shot the shell into your apartment rather than the guy who just made it? I mean, they're actually the ones who kind of killed your parents and all those other people in your country. Tony Stark was just one of many people who doubtlessly supplied materials that carried out that war. And if you think about it, given the idea that this is supposed to be somewhere in Eastern Europe, it's not really made clear. Wherever Sokovia is meant to be, it's a little bit of an analog to the former Yugoslavia, and it even kind of fits with the timeline. I've seen people who are more familiar with Eastern European accents than I am say that Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch had this sort of vaguely Serbian accent that's apparently, as always, is not that convincing. But when you get a British actor and an American actress trying to put on these sort of non-specific Eastern European sort of voices, I think this stuff like this is probably about the best you're gonna get, because, well, exactly how familiar do you think people in America are with the various types of Eastern European accents? Honest to God, as far as we're concerned, basically these people all, like Eastern Europeans, sound exactly the same as Russians. I'm sure a lot of people from that part of the world would probably take great offense at that, but understand, how often do you think we interact with people from Eastern Europe here in the United States? Not often. The vast majority of people, like even people who live in the big cities, unless they have live close to Pole Town or something, like that's what we call Polish neighborhoods here, or Little Odessa, and whatnot. They're not going to be interacting with people from Eastern Europe much at all. So again, it's just sort of vaguely lumped together with everybody else who has this sort of we use Cyrillic to write our language kind of accent. Let's put it that way. So yeah, but apart from he has that moment, and then Quicksilver is a seriously funny character. He has a lot of great jokes, and then he gets killed. And of course, people are pretty upset about that. But this is a Joss Whedon movie, so big bad final battle, somebody's gonna die, because that's what always happens in Joss Whedon stories. I mean, last time around they killed Phil Coulson. But as we've seen, somebody dying doesn't necessarily mean they're going to stay dead. I mean, the Tahiti thing, well, I don't think they're going to go there that way with Quicksilver, though it was created in case an Avenger did fall. But now, if they're going to bring him back, I would imagine they would use one of the Infinity Stones. But is that going to happen? Who knows? Now, Scarlet Witch, again, not super well fleshed out. A little annoyed that she could sneak up on the likes of Black Widow. I mean, come on, seriously? Never mind the rest of the Avengers, but whatever. They had to have her do stuff that would establish her as a serious, incredible person of power, and then she gets zapped by Hawkeye, which was damn hilarious. And she does have that really great moment with Hawkeye towards the end of the film in Sokovia, and and she does have that really nice like moment at the end with Ultron where it's like, do you know what it feels like to die and all that other stuff. So again, they do a reasonably good job with her, but it's like, okay, there's just so much going on that they don't really focus in on her to the degree that I think they should have been, especially since she's the one who survives to join the Avengers. So I think we probably should have focused in on her a lot more. Uh, now, oh yeah, and just before I go on, Baron Strucker, man, like, what a bullshit thing to do. Like, they kill the guy off screen. He's sort of hyped as being this big deal, and then this is what they do with him? I mean, I think Dr. List survived the whole thing because, well, he's been guest starring on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so I think they might wrap up his character's story there, but still, man, kind of bullshit. But anyway, Ultron. Well, Ultron is well done, and, obviously James Spader is having more than a little bit of fun with this. The thing is, though, Ultron is basically your typical Joss Whedon villain. He has some really hilarious lines. He's got a fun sense of humor. He occasionally throws out stuff that is more than a little bit scary, but he doesn't really stand out as being super distinctive among all the various bad guys that Joss Whedon has thrown at us. So again, this is one of those ones where it just sort of feels like, the plot and Ultron's ultimate goals seem very flawed. And a lot of this can be chalked to the fact that Ultron was basically just kind of a newborn who was lashing out at the world. He was meant to sort of raise these questions about, Tony Stark's philosophy and whether or not the Avengers do more harm than good, but it just mostly feels like, hey, I'm alive, I'm going to kill the Avengers and destroy the human race for reasons. And I'm going to be funny and call Captain America's shield a frisbee. Yeah. Although I did like that bit towards the end, where just before, at the end where he tells Scarlet Witch, he knows it's doomed, like, get out of there. He doesn't want, even after everything, he doesn't want her to die. Which does sort of show that there was, at least a little bit of a spark of something that's at least in some way resembled compassion. She was like one of the few people in the world he had anything even resembling a connection with. And sure, he was going to destroy the world and use her homeland as the bullet to do it. But yet, he didn't want her to die in front of him. Make of it what you will. And, let's see. Okay, it was definitely cool to see Don Cheadle and, the fellow who played Falcon, whose name I also cannot remember. I mean, guest appearance by War Machine in the final battle. A little disappointed we couldn't have got Falcon taking part in all of that too, but that would have been just another ball to keep in the air. But in this episode, by the end of the movie, Falcon and War Machine have joined the Avengers. Scarlet Witch has joined the Avengers. Vision has joined the Avengers. The Avengers is now no longer made up exclusively of Caucasians. So yeah, and I definitely do like the idea of them having that new Avengers facility in upstate. I kind of wonder if that's not going to be based on like Camp Hammond from Avengers Initiative. That would be kind of cool, but I don't think there's going to be a big statue of Jim Hammond out in the yards. But whatever, it'd be kind of cool if they called it that though. But we'll see what happens the next time around. We'll probably get to see that place fleshed out a little bit more in Captain America: Civil War. And did you notice that when they were hanging out, just as they were getting ready to leave, Tony's walking around in that shirt with kind of the silver streak across it? Nice little nod to the Quicksilver costume from the comics. And I suppose is sort of intended as a little bit of way of showing that Tony is indeed mourning the death of Pietro. I thought, Hawkeye giving that name to his kid was a little bit overdone, but, okay, whatever. But yeah, guys, I've been talking for almost 35 minutes about this movie, so I think you've heard me ramble more than enough. So, despite some notable flaws, this is still a really fun movie, and I enjoyed it. And if this is a hint of how things are going to be in the future Marvel movies, I'm not going to complain too much. So with that said, guys, I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe, and of course you can follow me on Twitter at Who's Your Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.